about this, the intro, yeah. What we want to learn today. Okay, what we want to learn today, inshallah, we will be learning about online privacy and data protection. But as I said, it could be lengthy, but we have like 20 minutes or so to share with you the gist of the topic. Okay, in the past weeks, I share with you some reading materials on the right to privacy in Malaysia, in which that article also looks at the legal positions in common law system as well as in Islamic legal systems. It is part of what we learn. Uh, Basically, we are asking what is a right to privacy. Why is it important? Actually, in the beginning, the topic or discussion about right to privacy is not so much always about cyber law. Okay, it is about civil law or torts law rather than cyber law. It is about right to person. Yeah, or sometimes it is also discussed under constitutional perspective of right of person. Yeah, the human rights, liberty of a person. That's why discussion about right to privacy will normally start with constitutional rights, because you are talking about rights. So we want to know whether this right is being protected in the constitution. So we have had this discussion long time before we talk about cyberspace or internet. But what makes this topic very relevant for cyber law is because the fact that the privacy has been so challenge, yeah, in this realm and environments of cyberspace, um by the fact that the data has been so much exploited, yeah, in the cyberspace environment, as well as in the IT facilitated, yeah, environment, because our data has been uh, exploited and processed. Um, um, why those things happen? Because this data would normally be used uh, even before any transaction taking place. The reason is because we need identifications. We need to identify each other. So with this idea of identification, then we start to, collect and process personal information of people, and therefore we start to collect from time to time, yeah, the data. And then since the data represents your identity as well as representing your life, representing your, movements, representing your well-being, representing your whereabouts, yeah, representing about you. So this data is so much part of your privacy. Yeah, if we talk about privacy, right, there are at least three dimensions. Yeah, one is physical privacy. You don't allow people to enter or to intrude into your physical life. This is for example, your own body. So this is being protected. You want people to be, not to intrude into your physical privacy. That's why we would normally control how close people should be around us. You want to control how much you will let people to know about, to see you, by, for example, putting your dress or covering yourself, or sometimes you just want to be um, um, unseen, or try to hide yourself from vicinity of public. So this is because we want to protect our physical, our body privacy. You will not allow people to touch you. You will not allow people to simply come and check your bag or your, yourself. That's why when it comes to raiding and people, law enforcement doing body check, for example, so certainly there is this issue of privacy being compromised. Like uh, you go to airports, and then they will always scan you, scan your bag. So of course, it is actually an intrusion to privacy, but then you realize that in some circumstances, this has to be compromised because there is a need for that. Yeah, a need for security, a need for public health. Nowadays, wherever you go, they will scan your temperature. What is that? They want you to write something about yourself. This is basically they force you to reveal, yeah, to reveal something out of you. So this is a physical privacy which otherwise would be absolutely under your control, and it is your right to decide, yeah, to what extent you want to disclose it to people. So this is a right to body privacy. And then we have right to territorial privacy when it comes to your house or your workplace or your place where you live. You don't want people to easily intrude to your place. That's why we have the law of trespass. The law of trespass is not only actually respecting your land or your property, but also it is about respecting your privacy. So actually the philosophy behind it is not only about property, but also your privacy. Yeah, and this is very much in Islam. I mentioned in my presentation also is very much highlighted. Even the Quran says something very specific about this. Yeah, when you want to enter into someone's house, you must knock. You must say salam. Wait until you're allowed to get in, or otherwise you should just go home. People, this thing has been educated to us very, very clearly. So, both in common law and in Islam, the territorial privacy is very, very much highly respected. Yeah, house is like an indefeasible, something that you that protect you and should not be intruded. Okay, but now we have problem because now people can intrude to your place without having to intrude physically into your place. How does it happen? Because we have technologies, we have camera. People will put the camera from distance and are able to actually see you and your house from distance. Yeah, you see, camera is getting more and more powerful this time. Able to catch pictures from so many, from a lot huge distant areas. And also we have another problem. Now people have this drone. Drone is a vehicle without people, yeah, unmanned aerial vehicles. UAV, unmanned aerial vehicles. Yeah. So we recently have one PhD student going to write about this and the implication to privacy and security. Because nowadays, yeah, because of this, people just need to fly the drone and is would be able to gather information which otherwise would be private and confidential. So this is the physical territorial privacy, and the last but not least is what we call as informational privacy. So informational privacy are those set of information which is about you, which tells people about you and identifies you, but should not actually be exploited and should not be disclosed to others without your control and without your permission, because it is about you. For example, your name, your IC numbers, your family information, a place where you live, and your about your education, about your work. It is your right, and the nature of right means it is as long as you control it, so it is considered private. But the moment you share, especially you share to the public domain, then you know that you already seize your right to privacy for it, because it is already going to public domain, and in most situations it is not easy to retract it, because the moment you put it on public, you know that you're not going to be able to control it back. That's why we have a huge problem here, where with this technology, internet, and so on, we had unconsciously, uh, or maybe consciously, but very negligently, yeah, shared our own data, yeah, shared and disclosed almost everything. Maybe after this, you want to check back again your Facebook wall. What is it that you have written on your Facebook or on your Instagram? Have you written everything about your life? about your past, about your present, and maybe about your future. Then you have no more private life left. Sorry to say, but this can be very determining for your life in future. Maybe in future we cannot expect any more certain privacy. The moment you become a public figure or public officer, and that moment people would be very much interested to dig about your past, and it is not difficult for them because all the data are there online. Too bad, yeah. Unfortunately, I remember one of the United States president. I forgot the name. There's this. I mean, just to take a very general idea about it. He argued that he he was running either candidate or actual president. He was running for presidency until somebody started to dig his past history, and then it ruined his candidacy. Too bad. Yeah, even to some extent, we don't want this to happen. That's why we have been having this prayer, yeah, for God, yeah, Allah, yeah, please, yeah, uh, protect, yeah, protect my sins, my evil parts of my life from the eyes of people, yeah, because we are all good at the eyes of people, just because they don't know about our dark side of life. I mean, this is really the mercy of God that we are living with, you know, or otherwise, you know, we have had, and then nobody has that clean past and their own. So this is something we really need, yeah, to remember, to keep remembering and be mindful about. So now we have this issue because of the internet. The privacy has been so challenged, either by our own negligence act or by other people who, you know, try to uh, exploit, try to obtain data arbitrarily, and then using it for other things. So that's why the issue of privacy, or especially online privacy, will be attached to data protection. Yeah. Even though, as I said, privacy can be a subject matter on its own, but when it comes to cyber law, this is becoming a huge problem, because, as a matter of fact, the uh, the trend of the technology, yeah, goes towards more liberalization of data. Yeah, I must say that, because more and more people realize that this data, including personal data, are actually the backbone of the future technology. You talk about artificial intelligence. Yeah, they can be intelligent because they learn from data, and they require this data from anywhere they can get, either from public domains, from social media, from their own storage, and wherever it is. That's why we call it big data. We mentioned big data in the beginning. Yeah, with more and more data available to us, that becomes easy for them to develop their product and services. Of course, they say this is for better experience of our consumers. So we will learn about our consumers. We want to know what they like. We want to know what they don't like. We want to know where they like to go. We want to know what they did in the last summer. And maybe we are able to tell you what you're going to do in the next summer, because this big data not only about the previous or past data, but also it tells, it teaches us about predictive analysis. Yeah, because now more and more industries are using this predictive analytics, yeah, using the big data and trying to learn the pattern of human behavior, and they are able to tell, for example, what fashion will come up next summer, or what technologies will be better in future, or which brand is going to lead in future. So they can predict all this, but all these are being done in the expense of people's privacy. Yeah, that is the issue now. So how to retract it? Number one, check again your Facebook. Yeah. If there is any way you can reduce and minimize the disclosure of your own personal data, try to do it. Otherwise, it will be too late, or maybe we don't know if it is too late by now. But at least you try to do it. I mean, from individual perspectives, try to check back and see. And then, of course, from the organizational perspective as well as from the state level, we have to do something. Yeah, that's why in the state level, there comes this idea of what personal data protection law. Okay, actually, in Europe, this law, personal data protection law, has been there since 1970s. In fact, some countries started in 1960s and then 70s, and then but then among the mushrooming legislation starting somewhere in 1980s, including the UK starting to have the law in 1984. At that time, of course, we never talk about data protection. We never talk about IT so much until we have this MSE and Vision 2020, right? In back in 90s. So we were somehow left behind, but it's okay. We are catching up. Yeah. So the then it is very logic that countries in Europe are more advanced when it comes to data protection law. Not even Americans, yeah, not even Americans are catching up. They are quite liberal in the way of using and exploiting personal information of people. Why is that? This is quite clear. Historically speaking, historically speaking, in Europe, they have this experience with uh, some political tensions as well as wars. For example, Nazis reign, yeah, during 1940s, 30s, and 40s. And then so the emergence of Eastern Bloc and Western Bloc. So this war era actually makes in that at that time governments uh, come up with these policies where uh, they want to know what people are doing. In other words, come up with this idea of surveillance. Yeah, the government want to know what happens, who is doing what, who is betraying, who is following the order, who is moving, and so on and so forth. So if you remember, there is this very revolutionary novel. It is a fiction written by George Orwell in 1948. Yeah, and the title is 1984. Yeah, it is written in 1948. The title is 1984. What is it about? Actually, he wrote about a surveillance society where people were under constant surveillance, under constant monitoring uh, by the big brother. Who is big brother? Basically the state. So that uh, background, yeah, makes people in Europe are getting more aware. And what more, they are also very much uh, adopted into the human rights, discourse. So they've been saying that, among these human rights is we should protect the privacy as well as the data of people. But in America, it is quite different. Yeah, the situation in Europe leads the countries in Europe to have strong legislation of data protection, as I said, in 70s, 80s. And then the culmination of it, or the peak of it, was back in 2016, when finally the European Union revamped their law and came up with this regulation in 2016, which is called GDPR. Yeah, General Data Protection Rules or Regulation, sorry, General Data Protection Regulation in 2016. So this become a very high standard. Everywhere now, countries look at what Europe is doing with their GDPR, because the standard is quite high. For example, when you want to collect data, what should you do? When you store the data of people, what should you do? We will discuss this, inshallah, we have time. So, but now I want to make a contrast comparison with the US. US has been known as very, laissez-faire or very relaxed on the issue of data protection, because they realize that the more you are regulating data or personal data, the more actually you are restricting businesses. Yeah. So in America, they actually are very concerned with the commercial side, commercial development. So they say that we should not legislate that personal data strictly or in an entire legislation, but rather we can make a sectoral law. sectoral law, for example, when you talk about banking law, okay, then you have to consider the privacy and of data. Then you talk about financial law, and okay, there is a need to talk about it. Also in education, also in insurance, and so on and so forth. So what we see in America is that they have sectoral laws dealing with personal data protection regulation, meaning it is different laws, sectoral laws, and they have different standards. Maybe the standard in financial sector is higher than the standard in the education sector, for example. So there is a situation in America, and therefore they used to have problem when they deal with Europeans, because Europeans argue, since you don't have a strong data protection law, then we cannot do business with you until and unless you make a very strong agreement between business to business. So in order to deal with this, Americans must make some arrangement with the Europe in order to allow their businesses to exchange data. Yeah. Okay. That is what I just mentioned is actually the development of the personal data protection law. Sorry, I'm not showing you the slide, though I have few slides on it, but I think by doing this, I do the eye opening and eyes and ears opening as well of what we have in a international perspective. Okay, so now what we can say, one of the highest and stringent standard on data protection is the GDPR by European Union. Yeah, because they have a single law for all the countries. So for all the members of the European Union, they will have a they will refer to the same law, which is the GDPR 2016. Okay, now what about other countries? Other countries, of course, they start to catch up. Malaysia, as a matter of fact, started the attempt back in 1999 when I was still a student. Then the first bill was publicized in year 2000, just before I decided what topic I want to write for my master thesis, master dissertation. Then I realized this is a good topic. Nobody ever wrote about it before. So I wrote about the protection of personal data in cyberspace, comparative study between American and European law. So I wrote it in 2001 and finished it in 2002 as my master dissertation. You may want to check it in the library. So at that time, Malaysia is still mulling or still considering to have the bill. Yeah. So let me just cut short because a lot of things happened between 99 2000, and then sleeping. People are not talking about data protection law until in sometime in 2007 people talk again about it. Parliament was crying out about this because there had been issues of misuse of personal data, yeah, in the society, and therefore the bill was being revived, and finally in 2010 we have the law, yeah, Personal Data Protection Act 2010. So in ASEAN, our law in Malaysia was the first, and then followed by Singapore in 2012, and then Philippines also in 2012, and then nobody else uh, until 2019, where Thailand finally had one, and Indonesia is still discussing about it in the parliament, maybe only in 2021. So we have this big five big ASEAN countries having the law. But other than this, like Australia, New Zealand already have all the law. Hong Kong, even China have prepared the bill. Japan already a very strong law on data protection. South Korea, of course, and then India preparing the bill also. And then all big countries in Europe, in Canada, and some Latin America like Brazil already have their own law. Uh, well, it now becomes like a global trend, yeah, because the reason is because we are doing a global trade, and when you do the global trade, normally your business partner will ask, if we trade with you, certainly we are going to share with you some personal information. either personal information about the traders or about consumers and whatnot. Yeah. Now the question is, do you have the law to protect our personal information? Yeah. For example, as you know, a lot of Western industries, yeah, outsource their customer service to ASEAN countries. For example, Philippines and India. And so Philippines and India are the two biggest countries for outsource, as well as Malaysia, actually, as well as Malaysia. So now, if you, for example, somebody in UK had this television set defective, so they will call the number for complaining about the product. So maybe the person who picked this phone is somewhere either in Bangladesh or in India. They have this outsourced system. So it will be Indian or Bangladeshi people who will pick the phone, and then the person asks about this, then they will guide. I remember last time I wanted to buy a ticket from KLM, which is a Dutch company, right? Then when I thought I was making call to the Malaysian representative, but then the person who picked my phone was someone in Philippines. So this is what they call as offshore outsource in business, where they send their outsource system to other countries. But now the problem is, of course, when you start doing that, meaning the data of your consumers will also be shared to that center, which is located in different countries. So many legislation like GDPR and including Malaysian law or any other law which follows the trend, they actually make it very strict. If you want to do business to another country and you have to transfer personal data to those countries, then you better make sure that this data is going to be protected in that country. In other words, they must have the similar law. So if they don't have similar law, there are some consequences. Number one, I mean the business process will be interrupted. It is not good for global trade. So if you want to encourage global trade and global business, then you better have a level playing field by having a similar law, because they are going to transfer the data to this country. And for your information, AirAsia, for example, AirAsia has outsourced their system, their support system, as well as consumer system and so on, to Indonesia. Well, of course, the problem is in Indonesia we don't have the law yet. Similar, but the law in Malaysia says that if you transfer the personal data of people in Malaysia to other countries for certain commercial purpose, then you must make sure that this data is being protected there. So how can you make sure if there is no law? There is the issue now. That's why now data protection has become the issue of global trade. For some countries, they consider that this is a barrier to trade. Barrier means, or you cannot enter into that country if you don't have the law. Yeah. Of course, this is not totally true, because after all, AirAsia still can make the business by having their data center moved to Indonesia. The law in Malaysia says that if you do not have, if the partner country does not have the similar law, so what is the solution? The solution is there must be a strong contract, strong agreement between AirAsia and then the partner in Indonesia. So to replace the law, then there must be this. Yeah. So I have this recently master student, UIA master student, just finished his master dissertation looking at this global trade implication of data protection law, especially in between ASEAN countries. Yeah, between three countries. Yeah, Singapore, Philippines, and Indonesia. So the issue is because they start to have this global commitment to data protection, but we see the standard is still different between Singapore and Philippines and Indonesia. The standard of protection is different. So you see data protection now becomes a global trade issue. Yeah. So that's why more and more countries are willing to legislate the data. Among the reason is for the purpose of global trade and global commerce. But of course, that is not the only reason. One of the compelling reason is from the inside the country itself, from the demand of people. Yeah, people now demand to have their data being protected. Yeah, if you don't have a clear law on this, then people will complain all the time. Yeah, because the data is prone to be what, misused. Yeah, that's why it is very important to have this law at one side to accomplish the need for the global trade. At another side, which is I think more compelling and more urgent, is to ensure the consumer protection, to ensure the privacy of people being protected and respected. Yeah, that's why we have this personal data protection law. And the countries keep on improving. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I am also involved by the Ministry of Communications and Multimedia to help them to review the law. Yeah, after 10 years, PDPA is now undergoing a review process. I did help them. Alhamdulillah, we are. I'm involved as one of the advisor of the team to advise them the areas, yeah, to be reviewed. And the work actually started last year, and this year they already announced. You can check later on the JPDP, Jabatan Perlindungan Data Pribadi, JPDP website. They already issued, yeah, the announcement that we are currently undergoing the review of the PDPA. And in fact they are showing you this document actually telling you what area they want to improve. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, I just highlighted the whole, uh, high, what do you call it, yeah? Sky view of the data protection. We have not really entered into the details, because basically the question is this. Okay, we have been talking about data protection. So what actually are the rules of data protection? Yeah, what are the rules of data protection? We don't have much time to detail out everything, but I will just simplify few points, and later on I will supply you with some reading materials. Yeah, actually the rules or the principle of data protection can be various. Different law highlight different set of rules, different set of principles, but all those principles are somehow similar from one country to another. Maybe they have between 10 principles, maybe one or two different emphasis, different wording. Yeah, but actually the principles are quite similar. Yeah, let me highlight to you 7 data protection principles under Malaysian law. So I'm going to show you the slide for that very quickly. Let me know if you already see it. Yeah.
Yes, we can see it.
Thank you.
Yes, Prof, we can see.
Okay. I want to share with you what Malaysian law has to say. This is not exactly the same thing what other countries have said, but I can assure you that most of more than 90% of what I'm going to say is actually found in other law as well. Yeah. So let me talk about this. In Malaysian law, between section 5, section 6, actually, starting from section 6 until section 12, yeah, of the Personal Data Protection Act 2010, yeah, it highlights to you 7 PDP principles, 7 personal data protection principles. So this is the gist of the law. Yeah, let me quickly tell you, in less than 10 minutes. Number 1 is there is what we call as general consent. Oh, sorry, general principle. What is general principle? Actually, under this general principle, it says that whatever data you want to collect, there must be a consent. Meaning, you cannot collect data without consent of the data subject. Data subject means the person who has the data, like the consumer, whatsoever. Yeah. When you start, for example, you want to open a bank account, then they will ask you to fill up some data. So this data, because it must be done upon your consent, cannot be forced. In other words, later on there will be clauses or words to show that you have consented to all this data being revealed to the bank, for example. So the idea of general principle is that you must not collect data without consent. Yeah. So in other words, there must be a clear situation where people will be informed about this. You cannot simply secretly collecting the data, because meaning there is no consent given. Yeah, but you may have questions, but we can postpone questions whatsoever, because there will be a lot of details talking about how consent is given, is there implied consent and whatnot. Yeah, the the act does not actually say how the consent to be given, and in fact it allows implied consent. Okay, however, having said that, there are situations where consent may not be required. For example, if it is for the purpose of, some public interest, which is very, justifiable. Yeah, of course details will tell you later, but for example, for the purpose of security, for the purpose of public health, sometimes it is data is collected without your consent and without actually getting you to consent on it, but this may be allowed for the purpose of necessity. Okay, but sometimes consent is considered taken, especially if it is necessary for your own purpose. For example, you want to book an online ticket, right, by using AirAsia, but at the same time you are also asking for insurance. So this is like, by implication, you actually allow the data to be shared and to be collected for the insurance purpose, because you are booking for airport and for transport purpose, but then you book for insurance, then therefore it will also be needed there for the purpose of completing the transaction. So this is some general details. Also, when you want to collect data and to get consent, you must make sure that the data is collected for certain purpose. That's why this is under general principle. Under general principle, there are few things. Yeah, for consent, for the purpose must be clear, and also it must not be too much. Yeah, when you collect data, you must collect data according to the necessity only, according to the need. Yeah, not collecting too much data. Okay, that is only the first principle. Second principle is called notice and choice, which means whenever people want to collect your data, they must inform you. Let's say you are customer, they need to inform you certain things, yeah, about the policies, about what they are going to do with the data, about the how they collect the data from. So this is all under the things under notices. That's why, because of this principle, everywhere you see they must put privacy policy, isn't it? Whatever you do, banking, ATM, transport, getting tickets, go to any website, now they have privacy policy. This is for the purpose of notifying you about their data collection, and also at the same time maybe giving you choice. What are the choices you have in terms of data submission? Maybe certain data is not compulsory, then it is your choice either to give or not to give. So more or less it's about that. Yeah, about notice and choice. The third principle, disclosure, meaning it must be very clear when you collect data, you must make sure that the data is not disclosed to a third party without prior consent. Yeah, so if you want to collect data, for example, in UIA, UIA collect students' data. Then is there any situation where UIA will be sharing the data to a third party? And if the answer is yes, then better it is informed to the person, to the data subject. Yeah. So that is the principle of disclosure. So it is not being disclosed to anyone without a consent. Next, what to do with the data? You have to make sure it is secure. So the moment the data is already collected by banks, by telco, by university, by your employer, yeah, so these people must ensure that there is the security measures, yeah, to protect the data intact and to be protected from any unwanted breaches, leakage, hackers, and so on and so forth. That's why now, because of this law, if there is any hacking incident, of course, hackers are going to be criminalized because it is wrong under Computer Crimes Act. But we will ask, yeah, if there is any personal data being stolen or being accessed by hackers, we want to check whether or not the organization or the companies affected, whether they already have proper security measures in place? If the answer is no, meaning they violate or they have not complied with the data principles. Yeah. So they cannot simply say, "Oh, it is a third party. We are not liable." But then we want to see whether you have done this. This is what we call a statutory duty. Yeah, a statutory duty meaning if you fail to do statutory duty, then it is a wrong. Yeah, and in fact, it is a crime. It is an offense. As you see down there, whoever is found contravening the above principle, any of this principle, commits an offense and shall on conviction be liable to fine not exceeding 300,000 ringgit or to imprisonment not exceeding 2 years or both. So this is made as an offense. That's why it's very strong, actually, a very strong law. Yeah. Next, other than security, is retention. I'm going to finish because time is also up. I'm going to finish soon. Retention, what does it mean? Retention means penyimpanan, right? Storage of data. So based on this law, it is very important how to know or to decide how long you want to store the data. Of course, you store the data as long as you need it. And the law doesn't say you have to store it 5 years, 10 years, 1 decade, and so on. No, it depends on your need. If you still have the need according to the contract earlier, then that's it. Let's say you still have a bank account. As long as you still have a bank account and you have a transaction, then the bank still have right to keep your data. But let's say you already close your bank account. No more business, no loan, everything is done. Actually, you have right to stop, yeah, the bank from holding your data, your personal data. That is the right. However, there are some other laws that will make it possible for certain people or certain organization to keep the data longer for certain purpose. That is okay. Yeah, that is like an exception. But the moment you have no more need, then you should either delete that data or maybe you want to anonymize. What does it mean? Anonymize means maybe you just delete the data which is identifiable. Maybe you just delete the name, you delete the IC number, you delete the phone number, you delete the address. That's it. The rest of the, for example, the fluctuation of cash flow maybe remains there, but it is considered anonymous because there is no personal identification. That is okay. Yeah, that is okay. It is not considered as personal data. I actually forget to say what is personal data. As long as that by that data you can identify a person, that is a personal data. Yeah, by a name, by a metric number, IC number, phone number, or maybe by combination. Yeah, address as well as the address and work employment. That can be each of it as a personal data. So next, I want to explain another two principle. Integrity principle. Integrity means whenever you collect data, you here means any company, any individuals. Yeah, whenever you want to collect data for certain purpose, commercial in nature, then you must make sure the data is complete, accurate, up to date. What about getting people to write the form, but it is not complete? Okay, at least your part is to ensure and ask again and also provide some space that all these data are correct. Then it is not your blame, yeah, if it is not correct. That's why every time some companies like telco, like banks, they will remind their customers to update their data just in case they change. For example, you move to different address or any other difference, you better change and better inform the company, because that is part of their obligation to ensure the data is complete, accurate, up to date. Last but not least is called access principle. By access principle, that means if we are considering, for example, banks, yeah, so these banks will have to give right to the customers to refer and to access their data. Meaning, if the customers wants to know about their own data and knock the door and ask the people, I want to know what data you're holding about me and on what kind of, what is it that you do with my data, then they have to consider, they have to do to respond to this. They have to allow this until and unless there is a reason, there is exemption in law. a situation where it is not possible, then you say sorry, you cannot do this because what and what must you must mention. As so it is as a matter of right, they have right to actually access. So you want to know, for example, I give you scenario, Mr. Sundar, for example, you have been receiving calls from unknown people. Have you ever received that? Calling and start to
Yes,
offer.
yes.
Exactly. Everyone
Yeah.
almost now. Yeah. And
Yeah.
they start to offer you this, offer you that. Then you don't like it, of course. Then you ask these people where you get my data from. Maybe either they will tell you the truth or they will not tell you the truth, either or. But the second one is more often actually. They will not tell you. But if you realize or you suspect that this data is actually taken from your bank, for example, bank A, because you realize this data, you never give your number except for this bank, for example, then you realize maybe they get it from this bank. So you want to know and you go to this bank, I want to make inquiry and access about the use of my personal data. So according to this principle, they should allow it. They should respond, they should allow you to have access, meaning they're going to show you, okay, this is your the set of your data and we are using it for this purpose, this and this. Maybe after that you want to make inquiry. Have you ever leaked the data to any other person? Of course, they say, "Oh no, we are keeping a privacy of our customers at the highest level. We respect the privacy of people." Of course, this is a standard answer. But sometimes actually it happens, maybe because of the insider, because of the negligence of some people, and so on and so forth. Yeah, these things happen from time to time. Okay, so brothers and sisters, what I have done today is I just completed explaining to you a very important gist of the PDPA, which is the 7 principles. We are talking about what to do and what not to do with this data, and this is summarized in these 7 PDP principles in this PDPA, and it is the obligation of all data users. Data users means like banks, like telco, whoever use the data, including individuals, whoever use the data for commercial purpose, they must make sure they comply with all this. Yeah, I just said for commercial purpose. Why? Because PDPA exclude the non-commercial purpose. Well, to me it is unfortunate because it opens up the possibilities for people to misuse the data which is not considered commercial. But that is another story to say lah. But what is very important for me is for you to understand these 7 principles, and this is actually the gist of the personal data protection. Any quick question from you, or otherwise we will conclude and we can reserve questions in other meeting, or if you have a like quick pressing question, please. I hope you have been following. Yeah? And as you realize, actually our data should be well protected, yeah, by this law.
Yes, Prof. It's clear.
Yes, there are so many already in the law, uh, which is expected, yeah, to give protection to our data. However, in reality, yeah, jauh panggang dari api. Yeah, the reality is far from the what we want. Yeah, that's the word, jauh panggang dari api. Jadi jadi tukar channel. So the fact is that the enforcement is still very far from what the law wishes to happen, because this exploitation of data is still very rampant, yeah, in Malaysia. Only this morning, I think, yeah, I just got a phone call, yeah, from this lady, started to talk about some product, some service. I know where it goes, so I answered to her, okay, miss, I don't want to waste your time and my time. Yeah, I'm not going to be interested in this. We can end this conversation. Then she was like very she was aggressively, responding to me. How can you say that? You haven't heard anything from me. I said, I don't want to hear anything from you. This is unsolicited call, I said. How do you get my number and do you know who I am? Yeah, then she started to say, yes, you are Mr. Sonny. Right, blah, blah, blah. How do you know about me? Then she said, you actually have signed up from our some products. I don't think so. I don't think this is an unsolicited call, and I'm not going to. So finally, she realized she is wasting her time and my time, so she ended the call. Yeah, but interestingly, this one was quite aggressive. Yeah, in the past, I used to have some other calls. They are like, okay, sorry, sir. Okay, sorry, sorry, man. But this one was quite aggressive. Maybe she was very desperate, because of the pandemic and so on. You see. Okay, that is what I think. I think what I want to cover for this lecture. Thank you for your participation. If you have no question, we can end very soon. If you have any more question to follow up, I'm welcoming it. Is there any quick question maybe before I
Sir, Surani here.
proceed to end?
Assalamualaikum.
Yes, yes, Rani.
I just
Waalaikumsalam
want to
warahmatullah.
ask about the data protection in the especially between agencies, government agencies, because
Mm-hmm.
usually they will collaborate or venture into like 4 or 5 agencies or more, and then
Right.
uh, give each other the data of the consumers. So, for example, IRBM collaborate the company's commission, the bank, and
Exactly. I know.
the insolvency, and also many other
Yeah.
agencies, immigration and customs also. So, the data protection in this collaboration.
Okay. Of course, I have not explained everything about this law. There are exceptions. There are explanations. First of all, that this PDPA, uh, unlike in other countries, yeah, our law does not apply for government data or data processed by government. So this is one of the big difference our law comes with. It doesn't apply to data processed by governments. Now the issue is who is government. It doesn't really say the extent of it. It only says the government at federal and state level. So there has been, since the law is silent afterwards, and actually reference to other laws is not very helpful because there is no other law saying who is considered government, because different interpretation will say differently. For example, about statutory bodies. IRB is statutory bodies, right? And others lah, KWSP, and then we have this municipalities. I mean, there are so many interpretation to it, but so far I can tell you, because we don't have any court case yet. Otherwise, it can help to interpret. But our government has been quite strictly applying the meaning of government only to include the government at the either judiciary, parliament, or executive level. Yeah, and any agencies which are right directly under the executive monitoring. So, for example, police I think is right under the KDN kan, Kementerian Dalam
Yes,
Negeri.
yes, yes, sir. Yes.
So certainly then it is. Then we have hospitals. This is interesting. We have public hospitals like university, like general hospital, like those. They are considered part of the government because they are under direct structure and supervision of Ministry of Health. Yeah, but the same does not happen with public universities, because most of public universities are either companies like UIA or statutory bodies. Yeah, they are statutorily established. So all this while the interpretation has been that statutory bodies are not considered the extension of government. Yeah, this is the attitude or the understanding so far. So by that kind of understanding, most of these bodies, including municipalities, including I think IRBs, then commission, all these commissions, yeah, will have to abide by these rules under the PDPA. Until and unless you go and you have a case in the court, and then you challenge the interpretation and so on, then it may be Or otherwise, the word government in PDPA has been strictly interpreted and limited, because the idea is this, IRB, for example, as a matter of fact, it will not be considered as extension of government, because otherwise it will make like so many, agencies are being exempted, and that can be defeating the purpose of the law. However, IRB should not worry to some extent, because what IRB is doing is actually doing a regulatory functions, right? You actually are doing regulatory functions, because there is a law explaining your function, and that by that law you are actually doing the work. So under the PDPA, there is also another set of exceptions or exemptions, where if the body or the organization or the agency are implementing or actually doing regulatory function, then they can be exempted. Yeah. So we can use this principle. For example, you are doing the taxation and all that. Maybe to some extent, it is not a blanket exemption. You need to check again the PDPA in what area you are being exempted. So that has been the interpretation. Therefore, exchanging the data between these organizations may be restricted by the Act, until and unless you have managed, to get consent, yeah, from the people, from the people who own the data subject, we call it. So if there is this consent or regulatory function, as I said, that can be your basis, yeah, for getting this data being exchanged. However, if you collaborate with banks, trying to gauge and to get data from the banks, you must remember that these banks are subjected to the law. So they cannot easily, issue the data to you until and unless there are some reason, for example, for regulatory function, or for the prevention of crime, or for administration of justice, or for the purpose of court, and so on. So there are this exception under section 45. Yeah, there's a long list of situations where you can use as an exemption. Well, that can be another hours of a lecture. So I rather suffice you with that comments.
Yes, thank you, Doctor.
You're welcome.
But sitting in the position of the officer, I think those data are golden. But uh, if I'm sitting in the position of a taxpayer, I think like it's
I
unfair.
understand. I understand. Then you really need to take the balance of the two. That's why the law, while having, applying the principles on your agency, at the same time, they also allow if it is for the purpose of regulatory function. So meaning you have to get back to the laws, looking back, which part of the law that will allow you to do just that.
Right. So thank you.
You see, I must tell you, this area is very, very far-reaching. Yeah, very far-reaching. It will include a lot of all industries, across sectors, public, private, even individuals. Individuals who are doing, for example, online marketing, who are doing what MLM marketing. They are doing marketing for them for their own purpose. They are also subject to the law. Yeah, even for those who are not a registered business, but you do. But if you simply have you have database of people's numbers for your own purpose, personal, this is excluded. This is okay as long as you don't use that for your own business. The moment you do it for business, then you have to abide by the principles of data protection. Okay, I believe this is good enough to be your eye opener. I look at your own reading materials and try to expand your reading as well. This is a very hot topic people been talking about. I hope you can read this with interest, because there is a secret behind this. Behind that, I can tell you that there are a lot more demands, in future market. job market for those people who understand and who can deal with these data protection issues. Yeah, I already see how the job market is being formed, and the demand is getting more and more for you to, and there will be a specific regulatory position for this job market, which is called DPO, yeah, Data Protection Officer. That's why one of the title I proposed to you was to understand the duty of data protection officers. Yeah, what is the duty under the law? And that is actually an interesting topic. Yeah, and our law is going to be amended in order to include the duty of having data protection officer, which means like telcos, like big companies, hospitals, and so on. They need to have at least one person taking charge of this data protection management, and that's called DPO. Okay, very interesting, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you for your participation. We shall meet again, inshallah, soon, by next week, inshallah. But please, keep on reading for your own, and also continue your work. Okay, but at the same time, keep yourself safe. Okay, in this situation. Thank you. We'll see you again. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, bro.
Waalaikumsalam.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, bro.
Thank you, bro.
Thank you, bro.
Thank you, everyone.